Hello viewers, you're watching CrossMoto. The Chinese motorcycle industry has been surprising us recently. About 15 years ago, they made low-quality, small-displacement bikes, but now things are changing. Recently, the range has expanded to include many mid and large displacement motorcycles. Here's a touring enduro with an 800cc engine and a cruiser with an engine over a liter. A separate topic in the Chinese motorcycle industry is sidecar motorcycles. They have been produced in China for almost 70 years. In this video, I want to tell you about a new product for 2023. This year, the sidecar motorcycle lineup grew with the ChangJiang Adept 700 and the pricier Dynasty 700. It's also interesting that there are plans to sell this model on the Russian market, and possibly in other Commonwealth of Independent States countries as well. So let's take a closer look at this machine. Enjoy watching. Subtitles created by Demi Torzok. ChangJiang. In certain circles, this is a well-known Chinese motorcycle company famous for its sidecar motorcycles from the 1950s, when China began considering the production of its own motorcycles. And first and foremost, the military department was interested in this kind of equipment. But what kind of motorcycle did the military need? In the 1950s, that's right, a heavy motorcycle with a sidecar, one that could fit a machine gun, and if you tried hard enough, even a mortar, and also seat several soldiers in full gear. In 1950, through reverse engineering, Beijing Automobile Factory, Number 6 of the People's Liberation Army developed a military motorcycle based on the German Zundap KS 500. By the mid-1950s, 4,250 of these motorcycles had been produced, after which they were discontinued. At that time, Communist China and the Soviet Union were close allies. So it's unsurprising that, as friends, production of a sidecar copy of the Urbit M72 was organized in China, which itself was a copy of the German BMW R71. By the mid-1950s, the M72 was already seen as outdated at the Urbit motorcycle plant. ChangJiang motorcycle production started in the late 1950s. Different sources give different dates. According to some data, production started in November 1957. Some of the early ChangJiang 750 motorcycles were produced using Soviet components. The very first model was the M1 with a side-valve boxer engine of 750cc and 6-volt electrical equipment. The engine and gearbox of this motorcycle were both called Type 1. In September of '66, the Type 2 overhead valve power unit appeared, with a gearbox that was additionally equipped with a reverse gear. It only completely replaced the Type 1 on the assembly line in 1972, because by 1966 there was already a large stockpile of parts for the original model. And overall, for a very long time, ChangJiang produced machines that were very similar to Soviet motorcycles. From time to time, there were small changes to the sidecar. Sometimes they made the electrical system 12-volt, sometimes they slightly changed the sidecar frame, and so on. In 1980, the Chinese made an unsuccessful attempt to start producing a 900cc boxer engine, a copy of the BMW engine. Motorcycles similar to Soviet Urals, Dnipers, and 1940s BMWs were produced until 2009. However, it turned out to be impossible to endlessly produce a motorcycle whose technology dates back to 1930s Germany. ChangJiang decided to focus on developing their technology and meeting modern standards. So in 2017, the ChangJiang 650 appeared, equipped with a 650cc CF Moto engine, which is a replica of the Kawasaki ER6 engine. The result was a quite modern motorcycle: liquid cooling, fuel injection, compliance with standards, and so on. Most importantly, the engine's potential increased significantly. The 650cc copy of the ER6 engine produces 71 horsepower compared to 22 horsepower from the side valve copy of the M72. And so, in 2023, the Chinese brand presents an updated version of the motorcycle with a sidecar, the ChangJiang 700, with an inline twin engine of slightly increased displacement and power. The 700cc engine produces a maximum of 75 horsepower at 8,500 RPM and 68 Nms of torque at 6,500 RPM. The motorcycle with the sidecar weighs 296 kg and is capable of reaching a top speed of 130 km/h. The gearbox is 5-speed. It has a reverse gear, and the drive to the rear wheel is via a chain. Yes, this solution removes the option to add a drive to the sidecar wheel, and in fact, Ural remains the only brand offering a production motorcycle with a 2x3 wheel configuration. The fuel tank holds 18 liters of fuel, and the consumption per 100 kilometers is about 4.5 liters. As for the appearance, the motorcycle combines the classic design of a sidecar bike with modern solutions. There's a sidecar for the passenger. In addition to the comfortable-looking seat, there's a seat belt and a panel with a 12-volt socket USB ports, control switches, a fog light, and extra lighting. Now, the most important part, the price. In Russia, the ChangJiang Adept 700 costs $1,330,000, and the more advanced model, also with a sidecar, the ChangJiang Dynasty 7001 costs $1,380,000. That's at least $100,000 cheaper than the Ural. However, here's a fact. In China, this motorcycle costs about $7,000. Simple calculations show the motorcycle's price doubles when it crosses the border. There is also a solo motorcycle model in the lineup called Solo 700. It's listed at about $850,000. Many media outlets have already compared the new ChangJiang to the Ural and called the ChangJiang 700 a competitor to Urbit Motorcycle Zavod motorcycles, which are finally assembled in Kazakhstan. To get around the sanctions, I'll just say what I see from my perspective. ChangJiang will definitely be some competition for the Ural. However, look, in the third decade of the 21st century, there isn't such a massive demand for motorcycles in the countries of the former Soviet Union, especially for bikes with sidecars. If 50 years ago, this type of transport was a cheaper alternative to a car and was used as a workhorse, now a motorcycle with a sidecar is a certain style, as well as a vehicle with increased stability and capacity for traveling. Ural and ChangJiang engines are compared by raw numbers. The Chinese 700 outperforms the Ural in both power and torque. The Ural produces 41 horsepower and 57 Newton meters. The high-revving Chinese inline engine struggles more with a sidecar, while the Ural's boxer engine, known for strong low-end torque, is better for this purpose. Judging by the comments on a relatively recent video about the Chinese sidecar Tornado 520, the critical point for many viewers was the use of a chain drive on the rear wheel by the Chinese. Personally, I'm a fan of shaft drives and I ride a shaft-driven motorcycle, but it's important to understand that a shaft drive has both advantages and disadvantages for traveling. It's definitely better than a chain, requires maintenance much less often, and is more resistant to negative external factors, but it's more expensive than a chain and has slightly higher power losses. Let's honestly consider the purpose of a shaft drive. This is, let's say, a crossover with a sidecar. Yes, it's for traveling, but about 90–95% of this motorcycle's mileage will be on asphalt. It's not positioned as a vehicle for tackling wild off-road conditions like the Ural Gear Up, so a chain here is quite an appropriate solution. But we're used to remembering how, on a Dnieper or Ural with a sidecar, we used to haul half a ton of firewood down a muddy forest road. And at the same time, drawing a parallel with Chinese technology, the machine turned out to be interesting and quite respectable. What fate awaits the ChangJiang 700, how it will perform in use, and how it will sell, only time will tell. That's all for me for now. As usual, this was the CrossMoto channel. Thank you so much for watching and for your support in the form of likes, comments, shares, and subscribing to my channel. See you next time.